I have notes. I don't know if I'll use them. Joanne did my talk. You know, it happens every time. Whoever does a spiritual thought gets up here and starts rambling on, and they do exactly what I came to do. So we got to start over. We've been talking about, Angie started us off this month talking about both filtered consciousness, which Joanne talked about, and Christ consciousness. So, it was finals week in high school, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's your final. What is filtered consciousness? Okay, so I'll tell you a couple of stories that will describe filtered consciousness. Obviously, you haven't gotten it yet. Okay, filtered consciousness. Samurai warrior. Who can relate to a samurai warrior?
Me.
Yeah, we got a couple of them. Good. We flail our swords, don't we? Yes. Samurai warrior goes to the Zen master. Samurai warrior, Watchman, teach me about heaven and hell. Zen master looks at him and says, why would I bother with you? You are a buffoon. You are angry. You are nasty. Why would I even waste my time? Forget it. Well, can you imagine what the samurai warrior did? Yeah, sword came out. He grabs the Zen master, grabs the little ponytail at the back of the head, you know, just that little ponytail, grabs him, and goes to cut off his head. And the Zen master looks at him and says, that, sir, is hell. And the samurai warrior suddenly eclipsed. And he says, oh my God, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I know not what I do, what has happened to me. And the Zen master says, and that, sir, is heaven. Heaven and hell are these conscious states I think we can all relate to. This filtered thinking of it has to go my way. And that's just me, huh? Has to go my way, do it my way. If you're not thinking the way I think, if you're not doing it the way I do it, there's something wrong. Or the Christ consciousness of it's all good. I have another story that explains some more about filtered consciousness, because it goes deeper. There's a story, an ancient story of a man, traveler, walking from town to town. And he's got a brick in one hand, and a rock in the other hand. And he's got a huge backpack that's filled with sand. And he's got vines wrapped around his waist, down to his knees, so he can barely move his feet. And he's got this huge pumpkin sitting on top of his head. And he's trudging. Can you imagine hiking like that down? Be pretty tough, huh? You've done that. Yeah. And he's walking along, and someone sees him coming the other direction, and they say, sir, why are you carrying the rock? And he says, rock? And he looks at his hand, and there's a rock. And the man says, let go of the rock. Do you need that rock? He goes, no. Let's go of the rock. And he feels better. But he's still got all this other stuff. And he walks along a little further, and someone says, sir, why do you have that huge pumpkin on your head? It's weighing you down. And he said, the what? He says, there's a huge pumpkin on your head. He said, oh. He takes the pumpkin off. And he goes on, and he slowly runs into people who tell him all these other burdens that he's carrying. And he lets them all go. And he finds himself walking free. Unencumbered. Do we carry burdens that we don't even recognize that we're carrying because we're so used to them? Mm-hmm. Scientists found, this is really fun, scientists found that if you put a bunch of frogs in a huge cauldron of water and you turn up the heat and you start to heat this water and you turn it up pretty quickly, the frogs, bright as frogs are, jump out. They jump out of the water. The water heats up quickly, they jump out. But you take the same frogs, you put them back in the cauldron, and you turn that up just maybe 1 degree a day. Every day you change that temperature just 1 degree. They don't jump out. They adjust. And eventually, they're boiled. And they all die. Because they've gotten used to the uncomfortable. So, of course, my question for you today is, what's uncomfortable in your life that you've simply gotten used to? The rocks you don't even notice you're carrying. That's the filtered consciousness. That's what we're talking about. So, second part of the final, obviously, is what is Christ consciousness? Joanne just told you. What's Christ consciousness? Christ consciousness, I'm going to do stories for Christ consciousness too. And I got to get my stories in order because, if you don't do them in order, it doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah. Ancient Egyptians. Now, I don't know if any of this stuff is true, but I read it, so I'm going to share it with you because it sounds really good. Ancient Egyptians, when someone would die, they would do a mummification type process. And in doing that, they would remove what they considered the unessential organs. And they would leave what they considered the sacred organs. They would keep the heart and throw out the brains.
Yeah, that's right.
Clue in Christ consciousness. If we move from the heart instead of the head, what gets us in trouble? The little squirrel cage going on and on. The squirrel cage is what gets us in trouble. It's our thinking, sorry. No, it's just me. You're all staring at me like, what the heck is she talking about? My thinking's just fine. I have no issues. But when we move from our heart instead of our head, and we recognize that our brain is an unessential organ in Christ consciousness, and the heart is the sacred organ, that's where we move forward. Oh, this is another story. Another story about heaven and hell and consciousness and the way you think and the way you do things. A man is given a tour of the afterlife. And he's walking down this long corridor. And there are 2 doors in the corridor. And the first door they come to is marked hell. And the guide says, would you like to see? And he says, well, yes. And the door is opened and there is a long, huge room. And it's got this giant banquet table and it's piled with food. And all the people in there are starving and crying. Because the only thing they have to eat the food with are these long, long spoons. And they hold onto the spoons and they can't reach their mouths. And they're all starving. And he says, that's hell. Everything's there for you. You can't get to it. And they walk further down the hall, and they come to a door on the other side of the hallway, and it's marked heaven. And he says, would you like to see heaven? And he said, of course I would. He opens the door, the exact same hall, the exact same long room, huge table, filled with food. But in this room, everybody is happy, and everybody is smiling, and everybody is filled and content. And they have the same long spoons. But they're feeding each other. Everybody's content because they're feeding each other. That's what this season is about. Joanne talked about families. Joanne talked about what this all means. This season is about sharing. It's about coming from the heart.